Times Radio has done an excellent interview with a member from one of the with a prominent journalist in Greece, Evdoxia Lymperi, and she lays out very clearly what the mood of the Greek people at the moment and how King Charles has softened the rising anti-British sentiment, so that now Sunak is very clearly being dismissed in the Greek press as a weak prime minister. King Charles is wearing at the COP 2028 with the unmistakable Greek flag on his tie, woven into the tie, bought in Greece, apparently. Sunak is regarded as a weak prime minister who has caused diplomatic mischief, possibly because he's seen as pandering to Turkey, with whom there's a deal to sell Eurofighters. It's not one or the other. We have two hands. We can do two things at the same time. And if Rishi Sunak is only capable of doing one thing at any one time, well, he shows again his inadequacy. And she points out something rather brilliant, that the Acropolis Museum authorities have said that culture is not just about art and artifacts and what the Greeks sometimes called old stones, but it's also about the behavior of individuals. It's about courtesy, and it's about the traditions of ancient Greece, the idea of respect, the idea of discussion, the idea of the idea of peace, the idea of diplomacy. All of these are part of that culture, which comes from Pericles, which comes from the Acropolis, which has come into Western Europe, and even the name Europe is Greek. And one of the other things she says is that because of this row, the sculptures have actually achieved greater publicity than they would have done both in Greece and outside Greece. And this energizes that debate for their return. She says that the Greeks would not be prepared to accept a loan. And I think Greek resistance to a loan has now hardened because of Rishi Sunak's stupidity. I think there was a point last weekend on the BBC where Mitsotakis' language was so well judged that I think a loan was very much a possibility, and Sunak has scuppered that. As indeed he's scuppered so much goodwill that was directed towards him and towards his tenure in Number 10. So much has been thrown away by stupidity, by ideology, by stupid gestures, and by his trust in people who are not really worthy of senior responsibility in this country, let alone in his party. She suggests that there would have to be a new charity act. I'm not quite sure what she means there, but I think it adds to greater complexity, and I don't think, certainly from the language which has been used, that is a route that Keir Starmer would be happy going down. Effectively, this. Although the public mood for the return of the marbles has been catapulted into a new dimension, I think politically the language and the reality has gone back. So what we're looking for is an ethical solution, ethical access for the marbles. And I think the language of theft is absurd. It is a morally complex issue, and whether Elgin should have been given access to the marbles, whether he should have taken as much as he took, is morally questionable, but I think legally clear. Even though there's only one document and one version of the bill of sale or the edict or the deed that gave him permission, and that's only in an Italian translation. But I think it is clear, and it's also clear that the ownership of the marbles was transferred by him to the trustees of the British Museum in 1816, and the additional law in 1963 simply complicates that matter by making it impossible for the British Museum to loan something on a permanent basis or to gift something back on a permanent basis, or indeed, quote, return something. I think there are, 3,000 pieces in museums around the world which belong to the British Museum on a permanent, semi-permanent loan, and I see no reason why that could not have been something that could not have been part of an arrangement that was being discussed by George Osborne over the last 2 years. But I think Rishi Sunak has managed to get in the way of that conversation, and it's now going to be more complex legally and politically. Whereas I think for a short while there was a window of opportunity, like so many windows of opportunity presented to the present government. It's been closed because of posturing and foolish wordplay. Aye.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Evdoxia, I've caught wind of a few of the Greek press. This has not gone down that well. One of the Greek newspapers is not one of the most popular ones, but it had a picture of Rishi Sunak on the cover and some words in English, which nor you nor I can repeat on
we
any...
Cannot.
We can no. On radio or TV. Really quite rude. It's not gone down well, has it?
Not at all. It hasn't gone down well. In Greece, people are enthusiastic, of course, now about the Thai diplomacy of King Charles for his visit to COP28. They believe it's a signal of support to Greece. They have moved a little bit now.
Let's explain that just for people who might have missed it. It's
sure.
The front cover of the Times as well. And it's that King Charles appearing in Dubai. There's also a wonderful picture of him talking to Rishi Sunak, standing face to face. And he is wearing a tie which is unmistakably covered by the Greek flag. I know a lot of royal correspondents have said, no, it's just a pattern of crosses and lines. No, it isn't. I've had a good look at it from various different angles. It's a tie with the Greek flag repeated over and over and over again as the pattern.
Yes, it's woven. It's many Greek ties woven in the tie. It's not printed. It's a very luxurious tie that he bought. It belongs to. It comes from a store in Athens. They believe anyway. The people in Greece now believe it's a signal of support to Greece after the sudden cancellation of the meeting between Sunak and Mitsotakis. It was broadly reported in the British press, as you very well said, in the Times as well, as that the king, during his big speech, not only when he met Sunak, but during his big speech at the Global Climate Summit, wore this tie. So the Greek people are now happy. They moved a little bit from this anger, and the tie, as I said, before the news, before they see King Charles, friendship gesture, as I would call it, the Greeks were furious with Rishi Sunak for the insult. All the Greek political parties condemned the cancellation as a principle against the institution, the Greek prime minister. And the Greeks were calling all kinds of names, as you mentioned, the Greek tabloid.
Evdoxia, how is Rishi Sunak viewed from the Greek government now? Because I heard quite a lot of comments from officials saying, well, actually, they started mentioning his polling, for example, and starting excusing and saying, well, actually, this perhaps is Rishi Sunak trying to appear in control when he's behind the polls. How do they see him as a prime minister?
As a prime minister, they see him as a weak prime minister after his this diplomatic mischief. Actually, it was a mistake. It was they called it many names. The Greek government now doesn't talk anymore about the issue for 2 days now. They leave it as it is. The last statement we heard from the Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis was on Friday and said, "We've said everything we have to say." After the disruption, also, it's worth to say to mention that. Acropolis Museum was positioned saying, among other things, that culture is not only antiquities and works of art. Culture is also the relationships and behaviors of people. And that gives you a sense of, it reflects the general sense in the Greek public. Also, Mr. Mitsotakis said that when he visited the president, Katerina Sakelaropoulou, he said that in his belief, the move will not hurt relations between Greece and Britain in the longer term, at least, adding that Greece's demand for the reunification of the Parthenon sculptures had received that way more publicity than ever expected due to the turmoil. The UK Prime Minister accused Mitsotakis of failing to comply with an agreement not to comment on the historical artifacts, sometimes referred to as the Elgin Marbles, of course, with Greek officials saying there was no such deal. They denied categorically. Mitsotakis spoke he spoke with Keir Starmer as we again in the summit of COP28 for the climate. We saw some pictures there. They were both smiling. And now, two things. Diplomatic analysts, as I said, talk about a strange, misplaced, and unnecessary behavior from Rishi Sunak.
Okay.
Some others, it's interesting, they relate the incident with the possible sale of Eurofighters from Britain to Turkey.
Oh.
And lastly, I will mention the thing that you were talking earlier with Alexander. Archaeologists insist that they are not looking for an agreement with the British Museum. Archaeologists in Greece, right?
Yeah.
Because the only thing that can be done without changing the law is for them to give the sculptures through a loan, and this is a red line for Greece. There is a third road, a third way, and more appropriate, as they call it, for a new British piece of legislation called the Charity Act, which is a third way, not to change the 1963 law, but to create a new Charity Act, which would allow the sculptures to be removed in Athens.
Okay. Evdoxia, I have to leave it there for time constraints. Thank you so much, as ever, for speaking to us. Evdoxia Lymperi, she's the London correspondent